Let's get real. When it comes to mathematics, the stat block for a monster, it's quite a daunting process. So monster stat blocks and mathematics suffer from a universal problem. All the elements that are involved in that, they can't be balanced. They're not very good as a player difficulty yardstick for any tabletop role-playing game. No matter how you look at it, statistics, mathematics, they're just not a good yardstick. They might be a good yardstick if everything was in a perfect world, but you do not have that. The only thing with a monster stat block or the mathematics behind your monster that can be partially controlled and consistent are the numerical numbers. For example, things like an attack bonus or average damage output or hit points or health points, maybe your defense scores or armor class, proficiency bonuses, level bonuses, and saving throw bonuses. But even if you use a scaled table or a chart with numerical monster stats, you have to determine the monster's overall difficulty first. If you do not determine the monster's overall difficulty first, you run into a whole lot of additional problems as you're constantly readjusting. And so once you pick that difficulty on that table or chart, you have to stick with it, because any large, in fact even small adjustments to the monster's maths can have a huge effect. As soon as you add something like a monster trait or a special ability, things that aren't necessarily going to affect the game mathematically and have much broader aspect and application to your monster stat block, there's no way to accurately calculate the effect of that monster's special ability or trait on the difficulty for the players at the table. So something like monster immunities, resistances and vulnerabilities that do have a numerical aspect and affect something like health or hit points, they get applied sporadically to different combat situations. You can't factor them in accurately because a monster's immunities, resistances and vulnerabilities may not always apply in every single situation. When monsters have a condition immunity or a condition resistance or a condition vulnerability, it gets impossible to determine the outcome on a monster's difficulty in different combat encounters, situations and games. You can't even reuse an existing monster stat block for your homebrew creatures unless all of the stat block mathematics in a monster book are consistent and you don't have to change anything. Of course, that still doesn't solve the problem of all of those monster immunities, resistances, vulnerabilities, all the traits they have and all the special abilities. So there's an awful lot going on here, unfortunately. And then, of course, on top of that, monster level, creature difficulty, challenge rating, they give a game master or a dungeon master the impression that the monster stat block system, they are accurate. And if they're not accurate, they are a general guide. When in fact, too many factors come into play that undermine all of those assumptions. Because a group of players, their skill level, whatever group it is, will vary. Their skill level will vary. And you're using randomized dice to determine the outcome of attack rolls, damage output, different conditions, all that sort of stuff, whether something will come into play, spells. So the monster stat block mathematics in your game is no longer relevant to your gameplay. So why do we even have that sort of thing going on? Like, how do you solve that problem? You know, older versions of Dungeons and Dragons solve that problem by simply making a monster stat block. They never attached a difficulty level to them. There's nothing around creature difficulty, nothing around monster level, and nothing around challenge rating. There was not a yardstick. You just picked the monster that you thought was going to be appropriate for the situation, and you did the best you could. It was more art, and there was less of a belief that we could do this as a science, because monster stat block mathematics is not a science. It really isn't.